Hey out there, survivors, how are you all doing today? And welcome back to another episode of Let's Survive Interviews. Today, I'm kind of rushing through the intro, but that's because I gotta go fast. Because today we have the writers of Sonic the Hedgehog, the movie, or the Sonic the Hedgehog movie is probably a better way of putting it. We have Josh Miller and Pat Casey. Guys, thank you so much.
Hello, thanks for having us.
Yeah, glad to be here.
I've been excited. I've been kind of picking at you guys for a while, being like, I'd love to get you on, and then it was like New Year, it was like, okay, it's time, just like, let's do this thing. I mean,
Good way to start off the year, really.
Exactly. And like what it is like on the show here we talk to people like who, you know, video game creators, video game voice actors, but I at the end of the day, what you guys have done is what many thought impossible, which is you've created a good video game movie adaptation. I think a really good video game, but even if somebody was a detractor, I think they would still say it's a good video game movie adaptation.
I'd hope so.
Thanks for the kind words.
It didn't feel that hard. That's the crazy thing about the legacy of bad video game movies. We're more than happy when we go into meetings to accept the idea that we're somehow super geniuses who cracked the code, and we're just like, I don't know. I mean,
it was low-hanging fruit.
When we were trying to get the job, just like our friends that we told about it, we're just like, why? That seems like a terrible idea. Like, why? He's a super powered, fuzzy little guy who's
we're just making a superhero movie.
It's not that hard to make a movie about a hero and a villain.
Oh my god. But like, I guess, yeah, to kind of kick things off though, like, obviously Sonic the Hedgehog is, as we've discussed, a video game adaptation. And like, that's kind of what we talk about a lot here on the channel is video games. And just wonder, like, have you guys been into video games your whole lives? And stuff like that. Like, what's your legacy, I guess, with video games?
I'd say, I mean, Pat is I think every person, at least our age, certainly the original Nintendo and just the era where arcades were still a place you would hang out. I started as just, I played video games all the time, and it's tapered off to be more sporadically for me, but Pat's really kept up with it.
I mean, what's funny is like the original Nintendo, I never had one. I could only play it when I went over to someone else's house. I'd be like, let's play Mario, you guys. So my first system was the Genesis with when it came with Sonic as the game it came with. So I was like really got into Sonic, especially and then especially Sonic 2 when I was a big Genesis kid.
Sonic 2 was the best. It was like, I had a very similar experience in that, like, my first system, I didn't have an NES, but I had an Atari 2600 that my brother got. And,
we had an Atari, that's true.
Yeah. My brother got it, he never used it because he was into sports. He was the good son that was into sports and stuff, whereas I was just like 3-year-old me just planked down in front of the Atari and didn't get back up again.
Just playing Space Invaders, yeah, for sure.
There was Centipede was a big one, and River Raid. There was this game called River Raid where you were just a boat just driving along a river killing stuff. And my parents are like, maybe this is too violent for him, if they only knew.
But yeah, no, I've continued gaming the whole time. I've gone back and forth between being like PlayStation and Xbox. Like now I just got the Xbox Series X. Nice. The reason I got that instead of the PlayStation is because I managed to get one. I was just like, whichever one I can find for sale anywhere, I'll buy it. And then it turned out to be an Xbox.
Whereas I've maintained a pretty steady Nintendo guy console. It's funny though, I had a Genesis, but I begged my parents to get one. I feel this was such a short period of time, it's almost been forgotten by history, was that the Genesis initially came with Altered Beast.
Oh, wow.
Rise from your grave
and rescue my daughter.
Exactly. And I loved that arcade game, and I was just obsessed with like werewolves in general. Yes. And so I demanded to get that. And it's such an impossible game though. It's like, I can see how that did not successfully launch the Genesis.
Yeah. Josh, do you have that? Josh has like an arcade cabinet now in his house that can play a million old games. Do you have
I do, and the best thing about the arcade game though is that you don't put quarters in, so all the games you couldn't beat as a kid, you just keep hitting continue. Except Altered Beast, where there's some glitch on that, and the continue button doesn't work, so it's still as impossible as it was when you had to pay for it.
How far have you gotten? Like the second level, third level?
You just die constantly.
Because I know in the first level you turn into a werewolf. In the second level, do you turn into a dragon or something, or like a?
Eventually turned into like a bear, but again, I would always, it was like that, not as bad as Dragon's Lair, which was the most impossible money-eating game of all time that I feel like
that cost like 75 cents too. Like that was more expensive than the other arcade games.
Yeah, and I feel like I never got it past like the very first thing you had to do. That was always the great one. That was when in the arcade games, if you could find someone who was good at it, and just watch them play it. Like that was the goal I always had, but everyone was terrible at it.
It's funny because like it's funny because I talked to Graham Skipper was on the show a while back, and we talked a little bit about arcades because they were not a thing here in Ireland. Like, maybe if you went to like the amusements by the beach or something, there might be a little arcade section, and it might have like, you know, this was in the mid-90s, it might have maybe Street Fighter or, you know, a Mortal Kombat, and you'd be like, yes! But, like, Graham was kind of saying that in the States, like, and especially kind of in California area and stuff, it was like arcades where, like, your parents dumped you at the arcade and were like, learn about life here, child, and just kind of went to it.
Yeah, one for us because we're from
attached to things too, like
we're from Minnesota,
like an arcade,
and in Minnesota was like mall country, even more than places like Southern California because it would get cold. So that was like a place you could actually go during the winter without your parents and like, you know, mill around. So all malls had arcades.
Yeah, yeah.
I was at an arcade when I acquired my first watch. A kid sold me his digital watch for $2 because he was like playing Skate or Die or something.
Wow, so he was like a junkie, basically.
Yeah, he was like cracking out. It was a full-on junkie type situation.
Wow.
I wore that watch for years.
I am now glad to some extent that we didn't have easily accessible arcades here because I would have been that kid. That would have probably been me. But yeah, like... one of the other things that we kind of like to talk about here as well is because I am a gigantic video game nerd and fan, and I'm also a massive horror fan, and so horror gaming is kind of the beautiful Reese's Pieces of that. I mean, can you guys kind of remember the first, like I'll ask you individually, but like the first horror game you played and the effect it had on you?
I mean, Pat and I were talking about this before, especially because I don't play a lot of video games now. Basically, I always buy every Nintendo console and then play the new Mario, the new Zelda, the new Mario Kart, and then it often stops there. That's all you need.
Yeah.
But I play a disproportionate amount of horror games, I would say. I mean, Altered Beast is maybe one of my earliest memories, because I remember a movie theater I would go to had that right next to the Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom video game, which was also great. And the guy would just over and over say like, Alibaba will rule the world or whatever. Could barely understand it. But yeah, I don't like Maniac Mansion. That was another. Oh wow,
yeah, I love that game.
If you can consider that a horror game, it's not really scary. It's funny, but
or like Splatterhouse. Do you remember
Splatterhouse?
I have that on my arcade.
Yeah.
I mean, Castlevania, like all the really original Nintendo stuff. The original Friday the 13th game, which was horrible, but I loved Jason so much as a kid that I kind of convinced myself that I liked it.
What kind of game was that one even?
That was the
Nintendo
brilliant
or
thing
Sega?
That was Nintendo. I mean, it might have been on more than one, but I think
it was just on the NES.
I had the original NES. And that was the brilliant thing. The guys who did the new successful Friday the 13th game was finding a way where you can play as Jason. Yeah. Because that original one made the mistake of assuming that you wanted to be like the counselors. Yeah. It's like, no, it's not. You want to be Jason and go around and murder everybody.
One of the guests I was speaking to recently said that was one of the first horror games they played as well. But because I never played that, but I've heard about it because it's become this kind of infamous game now. I think the Angry Video Game Nerd did a piece on it, and that kind of blew it up. but like he was saying that there was moments where you'd just be walking along killing zombies, which I found hilarious, and then he said Jason would just like zip by and just like hit you or attack you or kill you, and you'd be like, what the hell? Like, where
it did feel like a game where the people making the game only had the most, like somebody sent them a bunch of stills from the movies and didn't really understand anything about them. And also, like, I guess again, until you have the computing power to do something like the new one, in their defense, I guess I don't know what the NES version of a Jason game should have been, other than just you being Jason and counselors running around and you murdering them.
This is my pitch for what it could have been. I feel like maybe they didn't have enough time to see the movies, because it's like back then, maybe, it was hard to get them even on video, if that was no one ever gives you enough time to do proper research for any kind of adaptation. That's like the fact of the world. But here's my pitch for what the Jason game could have been. It's just a side scroller, but Jason's just behind you the whole time, walking slowly at you, so you can never stop. It's Mario, but with Jason at the
It sounds like a good phone game.
It
like
does.
In the
it sounds
runner
like
subgenre.
Yeah, like Temple Run or something, but just with Jason. But it's really slow because Jason's just moving really slow.
That was when
you got to get past. You trip over things or whatever. You have to deal with obstacles, and he's getting closer.
The fact that you can teleport in the new Friday the 13th game, I was like, these guys get the franchise. That's a thing Jason can do.
I wonder if anyone will ever do that in a Jason movie.
He just appear.
Reveal that he like literally has teleportation powers, because he's always been doing it, but we have a scene where he's just like, and then like disappears and reappears.
The Star Trek effect,
I always like to envision the comedy version where he's like walking really methodically, and then the moment they can't see him anymore, he just starts like hauling ass, and then he has to like catch his breath and act like he never broke a sweat.
That's basically again what you do in the Friday the 13th game. The modern one is that other than the teleportation, if you're out of teleportation, would say, because it is a skill that you burn off or whatever, it is literally a case of like you run and then you see somebody and then you start walking slowly to be more Jason. So I mean, of the kind of horror games that you played though, are there any experiences that you remember that like really shook you? Because like I know, just to start off myself, like I remember like my first one like that was I went to a friend's house and he had Resident Evil on the PlayStation when it first came out, and the dogs bust through the windows, and
I remember that scene. There was something on like the ceiling very early in that game.
Yeah, that was it. I think that might have been Resident Evil 2 with the liquor on the ceiling. And there were these like pivotal moments where it was just like, oh shit, this can really scare me. This is not any less than a movie or a book. This is terrifying.
I do have fond memories of I never played, because I kind of like did, like I was saying earlier, I had Nintendo Genesis and played video games all the time, and really around the time of N64 I kind of just like stopped playing games for a while. So like I didn't see Resident Evil until I was in college, and one of our friends who was kind of like our Kramer, I assume that reference goes across the pond, but he would just sort of swing by whenever and just play games and watch movies, and he played Resident Evil just like by himself while me and my roommate would just be like chatting with friends online. And I just remember every now and then he'd be like, bah! But as far as a game really like creeping me out, I feel the closest that ever came was, I don't even remember what years those came out, but like the computer games, The Seventh Guest and The 11th Hour, which was kind of like a sequel spin-off. Those I thought were pretty creepy.
Those were kind of like Myst, sort of, but like an adventure game.
Which style. I really loved the old. Those weren't LucasArts games, no. I don't think, but I loved that kind of style, the point and click, 90s adventure games.
Those were like about finding whatever and putting it in the right spot, right?
Yeah, they were very puzzle based, and the cutscenes were all kind of hilariously stupid, but the atmosphere of it was very creepy, of just like exploring a dark house.
They're actually games that people have requested that I play on my Twitch channel. People have been like, I'd love to see you play The Seventh Guest, because I think a lot of people do have kind of fond memories of that game, but it is actually quite hard to get a copy of it now and stuff. But yeah, I loved those kind of interactive puzzle games as well, because again, it still felt like there were these gorgeously rendered images that you were like, it felt cinematic, even though it was a static image. It felt like, oh, this is like a movie, even though it's not.
Well, it had like creepy sound effects, right? Like,
Yeah.
like creepy
It was all,
and they like
it was all
really got all that
basically
atmosphere.
Yeah. But and you, Pat, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I was just thinking, like I haven't really played a lot of horror games until I thought back, and now I'm realizing that I somewhat have. Even though I never really played a lot of Resident Evil, but like I did get really into like Left 4 Dead for a while, which was incredibly fun. Josh, I don't know if you ever played that but where it's like the zombocalypse, and there you're four online people running from the zombies, and you basically can barely do anything to them, but you have to like rescue each other. You keep getting in trouble. That's like the biggest part of the game.
Yeah.
A lot of fun. And then like my favorite genre and like most of the games I play these days are like Dark Souls and Souls likes, which are kind of horror games, but kind of games, but very atmospheric.
They are scary as fuck because, like, by the way, yes, I will say at this point that swearing is allowed. I'm Irish. I couldn't take that away from anybody. But yeah, I played Dark Souls, Demon Souls when it first came out on the PS3. And I was like, I can't do this. This is impossible. I'm not playing this stupid game. And I stepped away from it. Dark Souls came out. I didn't play that. I was a reviewer then a couple of years later, and I had to play Dark Souls 2. And I thought it was okay. But it was Bloodborne. When I played Bloodborne, that got me really into it because it was so horror. Like, it was so scary. And the monsters were terrifying. And then I went back, and now I'm obsessed with that whole franchise. Like, now I'm playing through them all, and I love them so much.
It's funny, so many of those games, because it's kind of like you walk into an area, and the thing that makes them Dark Souls and different from other games is most games, if you get killed, you just go back to that same checkpoint. But Dark Souls has the element that, the further you get, you collect the souls, and if you die, you lose all your shit. And you play like a long time between fires.
Yeah.
But like, so it's like when you come to a new area and you're like, oh, here's this cave. Should I go into this cave? There's going to be something horrible in here, but I'm going to lose. I have 20,000 souls. I'm going to lose them all if I get killed by this monster before I even know what I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
And I go in, and then you see what it is, and you run away because you don't want to lose all your shit. And in most games, like you never run away from a challenge because it doesn't matter if you get killed. That game found a way for you to care a lot about whether or not you get killed. And that's the first, it's like you genuinely will be like, retreat. I'm going to come back and deal with this later.
And that's why it's the ultimate horror game, because you actually have like fear of death. In most other games, even Resident Evils or any of those, you're like, I'll just spawn at the last checkpoint. It's fine. Whereas in Dark Souls, you're like, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Please.
And my other thing is I recently got the Oculus Quest, the like VR headset. So I haven't really I've got a zombie game I've been playing, but now I don't even remember what the title is.
It's not. Oh, okay. There was one I'm thinking of, but I think it was a PlayStation one. It was called Arizona Sunshine. That was like another zombie VR thing.
That's on the Quest too, but I don't have that one. That's like the most expensive game on the Quest. But this one, it's like mostly a shooting gallery thing. But then there's also like I've been playing The Room VR, which is it's not really.
Yeah.
It's like a puzzle thing, like that. All the talk of The Seventh Guest is what made me think about it, because it's basically, it's like that drops you in like a museum or whatever, and you gotta go around and figure out how to unlock the sarcophagi and get the thing and go to the next thing. And like, it's very atmospheric, and nothing ever like pops out and scares you. Although occasionally, like when you turn a thing, then like tentacles will start coming out or whatever, and you're like, ah! But like the tentacles are never there to hurt you. They're just to unveil,
they're friendly
give you
tentacles.
The next key or whatever, the next puzzle cube, the next Hellraiser cube you need to get to the next area, But it is fun, and like being in that VR environment, because it's like when you're sitting at home playing on the TV, it is hard for anything to really scare you in a video game, for me at least. But like in there, like the thing, because it like really feels more like you're there. And in certain games that weren't even horror games, like there's one that's like, man, I don't remember the titles of any of these things. Just taking notes. That's like basically you're like a wizard in a wizard workshop, and just the game is just like picking up all the magic stuff and figuring out how it works. And there's kind of no objective, but every once in a while a rat will like run by and like skitter between your feet, and you're just like, ah, because it's like you forget that it's not real while you're there. It's like just like stuff like that works so well in VR. Like I can imagine making a super scary VR game, and possibly it exists and I just haven't played it yet.
I've played very little. Like, I have a PSVR. I haven't played that much VR stuff, but I did play. So, like, I played Resident Evil 7 like 3 times through on my PS4, and I finished it. It was scary, but I didn't like. It wasn't unbeatable or anything. It was just like, oh, that was pretty scary, but it wasn't too bad. When I got the VR, I decided to try Resident Evil 7 out in VR. I got to the entrance to like the mansion area in it, and I was looking into it through my eyes, and I was like, everything I've ever watched or everything I've been taught is telling me you do not step over the threshold into this scary place. Like, I forgot. Like you say, Pat, I didn't go, yeah, but it's a game. It's fine. I was like, I'm here. I'm in front of this horrible Louisiana, like, Texas Chainsaw House. Why would I ever go into it?
The potential with VR gaming is outrageous. I feel like the immersion is so great. Like, it kind of changes what games are all about. Like, I feel like when you're in VR, you don't need nearly as much action and gameplay, really, and like just like the being there is so strong as compared to playing a regular game.
I thought if they could turn 47 meters down the movie into a VR game, that would be so intense.
There was one that like I think it was like a PlayStation demo for the VR that was like the dive, I think, or the cage, I think.
I heard about. I didn't see it, but I heard about that.
That kind of had that idea of like but it felt too safe because I did see it, or I may have even played it because I think I got that demo disc with my PSVR. But like, yeah, it felt too safe because you kind of had this feeling like, oh, the shark's never actually gonna. This is all pre-set up, and the shark's never gonna actually break through the thing. Whereas if you're playing a game and like that, you felt like, oh no, this could go anywhere.
Yeah, and you gotta leave and come back. Little missions.
Yeah.
But awesome. Speaking of zombies, just reminded, kind of forgotten all about a game. It was a very brief period of time when we were living with an old roommate when we first moved out here, of a zombie game we'd play like at the end of the night when we were all drunk. There was a mod of House of the Dead called Typing of the Dead. It's the Sega Dreamcast. I don't remember why our roommate had it, but you could plug a full keyboard into it. And so instead of shooting the zombies would appear, and then a sentence would pop up on the screen, and you had to accurately type the whole sentence out to shoot the zombies.
Yeah, and like little enemies had short words. Yeah. And like big enemies, you'd have to like type a whole paragraph basically before they got you. We had a lot of fun with that.
Well, it's right. Now that everybody's growing up with computers, I don't feel like it's as special. But like for us as writers, I feel like 20 years ago, nobody, like the average person, could not type without looking at their fingers. So I felt like we were particularly good at that. Yeah, they were
like, this is our chance to shine.
Whips out like your special keyboard that's designed like a keytar. You're going to like rock it out.
I just thought about that, getting a custom, It would be fun. My girlfriend always makes fun of me because it's like when I'm writing stuff, I'll type, but I don't look at the screen and I don't look at my hands, and I can be like having a conversation. Well, I mean, and like I do all of them at a lower level if I'm doing everything simultaneously, but I do not look at my hands or at the screen most of the time.
That is very impressive. I'm actually doctoring a friend's script at the moment because like I'm helping him co-direct this movie next year, and well, this year now. And I just took the script and I was like, I'm just going to give it a tidy up and everything. But I find that even still, I am still like. I find that I write a lot, but even still, I'm still like, I don't look at my hands, but I do have to look at, I think I have to look at the screen. I think I'm just not,
I think most people look at the screen. The fact that I don't is a very strange thing. It's because I'm like, I'll be like imagining it, I'm watching the movie. I look up that there and I see the movie,
It's also riddled with typos.
Oh yeah, I always got a big typo pass after that.
Well, look, you gotta let it pour out of you first, and then you come back. That's the thing, isn't it?
That's true, man.
Exactly, you do. Like, that's what I want. Like, I'm nowhere near as accomplished as a writer as you guys or anything, but like that is one of the things that I do live by. Is like, if you like, don't just get it out first, and then you can redraft, you can polish, you can edit, you can fix it. Just get it out. But I'd love to actually. That's a great way of moving to like you guys, like what's your it's a great way of moving to a question that I had, which is writing partnerships are hard, like I think, but you guys have pretty much worked on like almost like 90% of the things you've done, it seems, together. So like, I just love to know, what is your dynamic? How does that work, and how do you make it work?
We're lucky in the sense, I think it's rarer to have long-lasting creative teams that were formed in adulthood. But we basically grew up together and essentially met on the suburb we lived in had a like live cable access like variety show. It was many things. It was a live call-in cable access variety show
on educational cable.
Nice.
The show was not educational.
The show was not educational. It was educational for the people who worked on it. That was the excuse.
Yeah,
so it was like publicly funded. I mean, with basically no budget, obviously.
It was like work experience, effectively, was it?
Yeah, we were getting our 10,000 hours in, as they say, in high school.
Yeah, we started both of us on that when we were like 14 or something.
Yeah.
And we've sort of joined the show as like the heads of rival camps of kids who both wanted the show. And the show was like run by older teens at the time, or like college kids even. But basically, like within months of us joining the cast, there were some like political machinations that we wound up in charge. Josh and I ran the show. Then
Lord of the Flies, that shit.
Yeah, it kind of was. It's amazing that we're successfully producing a TV show every Friday night.
That is amazing.
Like, I look back, I'm like, that doesn't sound like it would work.
Yeah.
And yet it did.
I mean, it didn't always work smoothly.
No. But it's just that, like, I think it's why you see a lot of successful creative duos or like siblings. I think we've known each other long enough that we basically fall into the same slot.
Yeah, I mean, we've been working together for so long and like seen so many movies together and stuff that we sort of like have developed kind of a shared worldview on how movies work and what movies should be like, and it like continues to develop. Like, we're not stuck in our ways, but we're like in it together. So it's like we're in accord. I mean, like when we disagree on how something should work, like we never disagree in a way that we can't then be like, well, let's talk through this and figure out what actually is the correct way to do it. And by the end, we're like, option A, that is better.
Yeah, when I hear about other, like, you'll hear stories of writing teams or whatever, and like screaming at each other and getting like throwing things, and like I literally can't even imagine it. I'm just like, why would you ever write another movie together?
Why would you want to? Yeah, exactly.
Like,
why would you want to put yourself through that?
Like, those movies would have to turn out pretty amazing for me to want to, like, every movie we wrote would have to be like the biggest hit Oscar-winning movie of the year. Otherwise, I'd just be like, yeah, I feel like this is maybe not worth it, but to each their own.
But like, one of the things that I find is I've been working with my DP for a few years now, and he's also my producer. We are exceptionally close. We say that we're like hetero life mates, Jane, Silent Bob, but we often say that on set we have like what we call like a symbiosis, or like I'll start saying something and before I've even finished it, Barry will be like, oh, like blah, and finish my thought process. I was just wondering if it's like that for you guys. Are you almost like one being?
A little bit. People usually haven't made, because people always make that observation about like the Coen brothers, that they seem like they're part of some hive mind. I don't feel like anyone's ever really made that joke or observation.
Although plenty of people have called you Pat and called me Josh.
Yes. One of us needs,
But we are very in tune. I mean, a lot of the times if one of us starts to say something, the other one already like
has an idea.
I know where this is going. So especially if the two of us have to talk a producer or somebody else into something, we can coordinate without having to verbally coordinate with each other.
Nice.
Well, it's funny because like we just had to go through, which is its own separate crazy story, because the Directors Guild doesn't care about, you can have 8 people write a movie, they don't care. Directors Guild is very ornery about directing teams. Like they kind of just don't want them to exist. And so we had to go through this whole process to get like approved, and then we didn't even end up doing the project.
Oh no!
Weird ending of that.
Yeah, we had to like especially appeal it and go in front of like a chamber of judgment, basically.
Part of the thing of that is weird is they specifically want you to be like the Coen brothers, where there really only is one of you in their mind. Like they dislike the idea that you could be functioning as two different people, that like I could be off somewhere dealing with some production design thing and one of the actors could come ask Pat a question, which to me is stupid. I feel like that's what's good about having two people.
Exactly, yeah.
If there might as well only be one of you, then it's like, what's, one of you could just be dead then, I guess, who cares?
Yeah, and there's certain directing partnerships where like one guy's like in charge of all the camera stuff and the other one talks to the actors, and like the DGA doesn't like that either, even though
so you basically got to
they want you to be standing shoulder to shoulder at all times.
Like the Russo brothers, I think, take a certain amount of pleasure because now they're so powerful, the DGA can't do anything about it. But they'll be like, oh, we're a team, but I'm going to direct this episode of this TV show, and my brother's going to direct this other episode, and then we're going to go right back to being a team, which you're not supposed to be able to do. The idea is once you become a team, it's like you have to assure them that that's it until you die. It's very like old school marriage style rules.
That's some crazy commitment. Yeah. Like,
but what are they going to kick the Russo brothers out of the guild? So I assume they're having fun with it.
I mean, it's like there've been a number of like brothers teams who were teams and then they fought about money or whatever, and now they're individuals. So it's like you can do it. The DGA just fucking hates it. They just don't want it.
Yeah.
I wonder. I was thinking about that there when you were talking, but I wonder if the guys like the Ready or Not guys, Radio Silence, isn't it?
They've had huge problems.
But what I was thinking is I was wondering if like, is that why they kind of go by that idea of like being Radio Silence and not two separate two separate people? It's like under this entity known as Radio Silence that. Well,
that's the thing though, is Radio Silence I think is 4 or 5 people.
Oh, really? Okay.
And that was their whole idea, was they're like, we're a collective. But once they started, that's which is all fine and good if you're making indie horror movies that aren't guild signatory projects. But once they started doing like studio movies, and I think it always did break down that way, where like one guy's the production designer, another guy's maybe the DP, but they basically had to be like, well, I guess us two are the directors. And I don't know quite how they square that financially amongst all of them. But that kind of sucks that you can't just decide for yourselves what you want your credit to be. I mean, I get it. There's a reason that the guilds evolved this way, is to protect the average writer, average director, average actor. It just does suck if you're in an instance where the system is kind of like fighting against you.
I mean, it's funny, because it's like bands, it's like some bands kind of split the money evenly amongst themselves, but a lot of bands, it's like the singer, like songwriter basically pockets 95% of the money. And those are the bands that don't last, because then they wind up in a situation where the rest of the guys are like, we should tour, because that's the only way they make any money. And the other guy's like, I don't want to tour. I'm too busy driving golden race cars off of cliffs into piles of supermodels. It's like everybody in the band ends up hating the rich guy.
I made this really inconvenient mistake, right? After my first indie feature film came out in 2017, and made absolutely no money. That's a lie. It made enough that I paid for the DVDs that I had printed up, that I sold. I covered the cost of them. That was great. I was like, wow, this has been a massive success. But at the same time, I got finance on a new car for myself, completely separately and independently to the situation with the movie. But then straight away, what everybody saw was the film came out, and then I had a new car, and everybody was like, you pocketed the money. I'm like, I can show you receipts. There was no money, guys. This was an indie movie. Welcome to the world of indie filmmaking. This is how it operates. But it was not the right time to get a fancy new car. So, I mean, before we jump to kind of getting into a little bit more about Sonic, just a quick question that I have is, like, you guys have worked on some cool, like really cool horror projects. Like you've been involved in 12 Deadly Days and Into the Dark. I mean, what was that whole process like? Because I mean, I actually got a Hulu account and a VPN so that I could watch the Into the Dark stuff here, because we don't have Hulu. And I One of my friends directed an episode. Gigi Saw Guerrero, she directed Culture Shock, which is one of my favorites. Also, like, I loved, I think it was Chelsea Stardust's episode as well.
Yeah.
Paul Davis's episode, which was the kick out, like the body. Great. You know, I knew I needed to see Into the Dark, but I'm just wondering, like, what was that whole experience like for you? And 12 Deadly Days, which I actually haven't seen. I'll fess up to that, but I'm curious about it.
This interview is over.
Yeah.
12 Deadly Days.
12 Deadly Days was super fun. Like that reminded us of doing our like live cable access show in a lot of ways, because basically our friends Chris Kulari and Generate created it, but at the time, it's funny because all we'd done is Golan the Insatiable as far as TV shows, but that was one more show than they'd done. And I think Blumhouse was like, you need to partner yourselves up with some more experienced people.
Some grizzled TV veterans.
They've been doing cable access shows since they were 14.
Yeah.
It's true, though. That experience counts.
It did. Me. It turned out that just doing, because, you know, Golan was animated, so to a certain extent, we had the same amount of experience them doing live action TV. But basically the timeline on that was that it got greenlit in, I think, mid-July, and they needed to have all 12 half-hour episodes shot, you know, edited, finalized, and turned in by the first week of November. Oh, wow. And I think at that point, only like 3 of the scripts had been started. But
yeah, so we basically,
but it was really fun though, because it was like, we liked moving that fast. It was moving so quickly that there was like very little oversight, I think is what was particularly fun. We of course
by the time we got any notes on anything, for the most part, it was always like, you guys can't do that. We're like, it's too late. We already did it.
We already shot the episode. Yeah.
When we were writing, the writer's room for that was so fast. It was like the 4 of us basically, plus our writer's assistant. We had like a writer's room, and like we would like break an episode every day, Monday through Friday, and then over the weekend we would basically be like, you write this one, you write that one, I'll write this one, you write that one, and we would all come back on Monday with like 4 episodes written basically, and then rewrite them together.
Holy shit.
There was almost no money to really do it, so it's like pretty rough around the edges, but it was
even
then
while we were shooting, like to save money on locations, we basically like made a deal with what was it called? The Pomona Development Center?
Oh, the Lanterman Development
Center in Pomona, which is like just inside the like radius of where you don't have to put people up in hotels for your crew.
But it should be.
They hated it. It was the longest drive. It was terrible. But it was like basically like this campus that used to be like a hospital and like housing for like.
It was basically in like the 70s. If you're like,
it was session 9. It sounds like it was the session 9.
It was session 9, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. It was like you could send your kid to be like a ward of this institute. And then the moment Ronald Reagan became governor of California, he like systematically started shutting it down. So it's basically like this.
So like parts of it were super session 90, extremely creepy and unsafe.
It was creepy.
But it was like, so we had this kind of playground to just be like, you know, we got to like turn this into a diner, and we had to try and create like houses.
That's cool. That's fun.
Place in houses, and there was just no houses really there. There was like one house that we kept changing into different houses over and over again, because it was an anthology series too. So for every every episode, we needed a new cast, new locations. We only had 3 days per episode, just back to back to back to back to shoot. Sometimes 3.5 days. We directed some of it.
Yeah.
It was so much fun. And the other thing is sometimes we would lose locations that we'd already shot because like we were paying like the bare minimum for these locations. So
American Doll.
If another show came in and wanted the same spot, they could like kick us out of our spot. So almost every morning we would roll in and we were like, what's going on? And our line producer was like, we lost the diner.
Shit.
And we would have to figure out a solution by
hop on some golf carts and find.
And so like that was the whole time. Yeah, we were cruising around on golf carts, solving huge problems every day. And it was pretty much the most fun we've ever had making TV. It was. I wish we could do it all the time.
Is that not like, but to me, everything you said is the reason that I love filmmaking. Like, it is that feeling of like, yeah, the thrill of the moment where it's like this location drops and you have to just come up with something. You just have to, it's that immediate problem solving, and like somebody comes up with a great idea and you're like, fuck yes, that's it. And you're just, the buzz, the energy you get when it does start to come together.
Yeah, that is what it's all about. Yeah, I got like a Fitbit while we were doing it, and then realized I was walking like 15 miles every day, just like running back and forth from the set to the office to the next set.
Yeah, super fun. That's something we'd like to repeat somehow. Obviously, you don't get to really choose such things, but we'd like it to occur again.
Okay, I need to get 12 Deadly Days sorted. Is that also available on Hulu as well, or is that because it's Blumhouse?
No, that was a YouTube.
Okay.
It was called YouTube Red, and then they rebranded it YouTube Premium.
I think I'm entitled to a free trial of that, so
Yeah, he's burned through. Not, that some episodes aren't great, but some of them are quite good, I'd say.
Yeah. Like episodes like 4 through 8, that's like the real sweet spot. That's where all the really good ones are.
The meat of it.
The meat.
Yeah. It's funny because it's like, they say when you do a season, it's like the beginning of your season and your end of your season should be the best parts, but the middle of our season was the best part.
But I think
that's you kind of start to hit your rhythm, and then and we're partially to blame for this. We had a 2-part finale that just like none of us could fully like wrap our heads around how to make it really good. So
and we never figured it out really.
Yeah, because we were writing it because we explained this insane schedule, but we were having to write the finale also while doing all this stuff. So
yeah,
it was just it was not ideal writing circumstances.
But I think that's the same. I mean, to be fair, with anthology series and any kind of anthology, whether a movie, a show, whatever, there's always the good elements, the bad elements, the best moments, the weakest. There's so few anthologies where you're like, it's perfect the whole way through and like everything works. But yeah, so guys, it is good to know that though, that it is available on YouTube because YouTube Red YouTube Premium, as you say, people can check it out.
And we're hoping it winds up somewhere else eventually.
Yeah, because I think
no
YouTube
one has
doesn't actually
YouTube.
own it. I think Blumhouse owns it, and at some point
they need to sell it to
Hulu
or Netflix or something.
It sounds like it's something that would have worked really well. And I know at Blumhouse were doing that kind of Facebook Watch stuff for a while, and I watched a show on that, and it was like their big kind of flagship Facebook Watch show. And now I can't even remember the name of it, but I saw that was available on Blu-ray and everything in stores, and I was like, oh, and this is just a Facebook Watch show. That's pretty incredible.
That would be nice if they had DVDs. I think then we'd get a piece of it.
I'm terrible that like anything I make, I get, even though like even on my last movie, the current distributor that has it is like, we shouldn't make DVDs and Blu-rays because you'll probably lose money on it. And I'm like, yeah, but I'll probably just get like 250 printed because I want.
Yeah, we're saying like Gull and the Insatiable, our animated show, picture behind me. No DVDs or Blu-ray for that. So like I have digital copies that I acquired illegally of my own show because we don't own any hard copies. That was the great thing about Sonic. It was like it had been so long since we had anything that had physical
form.
Sonic, they got all these different editions, like Steelbook Collector's Edition and stuff. It was great. I was so excited for that. I was like, we exist.
This is perfect. This is all lined up tremendously because, like, I mean, I think you kind of answered this question already, which I was going to ask, were you both kind of into Sonic the Hedgehog growing up, or like was it something that you got the movie or you got the gig and then it was like, well, I think you answered already, Pat, specifically about having your Genesis and loving Sonic and Sonic 2, but Josh, I know you were a Nintendo guy, so were you one of those guys that was like, fuck Sonic, Mario's better?
Well, I mean, it's funny because, and I guess this happens with anything that's around for a really long time. Both of us, I think together, but also independently, played so much Sonic 2. I said earlier, I got a Genesis to get Altered Beast, but then I remember when Sonic came out, and it was just funny too, because like, I had Nintendo as well. I got Genesis for a Christmas present, and then I saved up over like a whole year money mowing lawns and like shoveling driveways in the winter so I could buy a Super Nintendo because I still liked Mario, but I just remember how cool Genesis seemed like in comparison. And just like Mario seemed so
Sega
lame
does what
by
Nintendo
comparison.
don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And like, it's funny because I mean, I remember when Super Mario 3 came out, and that was such like a mind-blowing game, but just how fast Sonic was. And like, you go back and play those games now, the graphics like still really hold up.
Yeah.
And it's like the whole, because that's the funny thing then about like the early like three-dimensional games, like Mario 64 still kind of holds up, but like that whole era, it's like they're impossible to play now because the game mechanics are so shitty. But like the original Sonic games,
Mario 64 is brutal. Even though the like level design is great, but the camera's terrible.
It's terrible. But going back and playing like, because I remember when we got the gig, we used that as an excuse. We each got because Sega stopped making consoles, so we got a Nintendo DS. And at the time you could get a little cartridge that had the first 4 Sonic games on it. And just playing those again, I'm like, there's nothing about this other than they look like older 16-bit games, but the gameplay still holds up. Like nothing about it is dated.
The gameplay, the music, it just oozes like timelessness. Like my nephew who is 6 years old, like plays Sonic 2 as much as he plays Fortnite, or like he loves Sonic.
That's great.
Yeah, like and I wanted to show you this while we were on, but I grew like growing up. Me and my friend Niall Ryan, who we were friends since we were 3 years old. First day of like elementary school, made friends, and that was it. We were upset. Like he was the ultimate Sonic 2 guy. I was envious of him because he was so good at it. Whereas I was more Sonic 3 and Knuckles was my jam. Slap the carts together and get the full 14 levels or whatever it was. I remember when I was a kid, I got this Sonic Choose Your Own Adventure book. Apparently it was number 3. And this was Sonic versus Sonic. So like Sonic, who not Metallics, not Robot Sonic or whatever, like Sonic.
I've never heard of Sonic. This is a new one.
But that's the thing about Sonic the Hedgehog is it's been around for so many. And like this is, you can see this book came from the 90s. It's got the yellowing like everywhere. But like we would buy the Sonic the comics every week. We were like literally obsessed. I remember he started to lose a little bit of love for the franchise around the time of Sonic 3D Blast. I think it was Sonic 3D. Whereas I loved it. I've kind of always. I think the only one I never really liked was like the PS3 one, that awful one that everybody talks about is the worst.
Sonic 06, where he kisses a human girl.
Yes. How did you like? There's a great question. I mean, why doesn't Sonic kiss any human women in the movie?
I mean, it's funny, like when we did get the gig, because we didn't really have time. It actually came right on the heels of 12 Deadly Days.
Yeah, we actually had to leave like 6 days early on 12 Deadly Days.
Oh God, I can't wait to finish 12 Deadly Days, and then maybe we can take a week or 2 off and then work on Sonic. But then they were like, no, you got to work on Sonic right now. We were like, ah! Oh my God, like.
Cat. I was about to say, we didn't really have time to like. I mean, as it turned out, the movie that the director and everyone wanted to make wasn't the kind that would have necessitated some sort of insane mythology deep dive. But I think what Pat was going to say,
they wanted to stay away from getting too into the mythology.
Is that we really just had to jump right in. The other thing too is I know some fans like. I think fans mostly ended up liking the movie, but I also know other people have been like, "Why didn't you have this? Why didn't you have that from the comics?" But they didn't have the rights to like everything. Like I don't think they had any of the rights to the comics.
But like, I think the one benefit of that though, as well, is it doesn't alienate people. I mean, you can literally be, as I say, I saw it with my 2 daughters. It was the last movie we saw in the cinema. Holy shit! Before COVID hit. I think that's maybe the case for a lot of people because of the time it released.
Yeah.
Especially
we got
in
lucky
Europe.
on the timing that we.
Especially in Europe.
No, but we're definitely taking the tactic that. I mean, it's a movie. Like it was pretty cheap for a superhero movie, all things considered, but it's still expensive. Like it's more than a Blumhouse movie. It's got to appeal to a certain percentage of the population, which means that it can't just be Yeah, just thinking back, like that was definitely a mistake I think other video game movies did make, was just going like way too one-to-one literal in their adaptation. And it's just like, who's this movie for?
Yeah.
Because it's like,
it's going to piss off the gamers. Yeah.
Play the game. And yet would always manage to still be unfaithful enough to even piss off the gamers. So it's just
and like Neil Moritz, who was one of our producers, like he was like, let's not get too bogged down in like this. Like this has got to be simple. It can't be too complicated. Anytime we'd be like, start talking about the other planet or any like mythological backstory, it was just kind of like, too much, you guys. Simple it down. We'll get to that in the sequels, maybe, you know.
It's crazy how the simplicity works so beautifully, because even just something like just being like, oh, there's a planet with mushrooms, and straight away every Sonic fan goes, oh, Mushroom Hill Zone. But you don't even have to. Every Sonic fan thinks that, but every 5-year-old, my 5-year-old, 9-year-old are just like, oh, cool, a planet with mushrooms.
And the adults who don't know it, it's like my parents understood that. They were like, yeah, I get it. It's a planet full of mushrooms with no people on it. Like that's a concept everyone can get.
Exactly. And I mean, it is funny because it's so true what you guys are saying. The only other video game adaptation that I kind of really love is the Mortal Kombat movie from 95 or 96. And that works because Mortal Kombat is nonsense anyway. Like Mortal Kombat is, if you look at the game, like it's not like it has this big overarching story. It's like, you're a bunch of people on an island with crazy powers, kill each other, fight. Like that's it. Go. Like there's your movie.
We were definitely fans of that movie when it came out. I'll also say
we might have seen that movie together when we were teenagers.
No,
we
probably.
We walked out. We were like, hell yeah, Johnny Cage.
I would say I just recently rewatched the first Tomb Raider. The first half of that movie is actually pretty good. And it's just kind of, by the time it gets to the end, you're like, oh, now I understand why people say this movie's bad. That's also a movie that really suffers from the era of digital effects of when it came out. Like the whole final third is just like a bunch of awful CG.
Really bad CGI, yeah. I remember, and this is maybe a little bit of a controversial statement, but I'm a diehard Silent Hill fan, and I felt exactly the same about the Silent Hill movie as you just said about Tomb Raider. The first 30 to 45 minutes of that movie, I was like, this is perfect. They've nailed the atmosphere, they've nailed the tone, this is everything I could have wanted from a Silent Hill movie, not a Sonic the Hedgehog. Now, Sonic in Silent Hill would be incredible. But no, I was so into it. And
crossover!
Then it just went kind of to a place that I was like, again, it was that wait, who is this aimed at? Was it me, or is it a broader, where did this go? But as I say, that's the thing is with adaptations is hitting the target audience, because there is no target audience. It's everyone. It's the people who like the games, the people who don't like the games, people who don't know what the games are. Hitting that audience is so hard that it is super admirable. Just a quick kind of side note, before I came on to do this interview, I talked to several people. I was on a couple of people's streams, and I said I'm interviewing the writers of the Sonic the Hedgehog movie, and without fail, almost everybody was like, oh, that was a really fun movie. They were almost everybody was like, that was so much fun, I really enjoyed it. Everyone said the same kind of things. You probably heard a million times. Loved Jim Carrey in it, loved this, loved that. I got a great kick watching it because I'm one of my buddies, Lee Majdoub, is Jim Carrey's sidekick in the movie. So that was
did you know him? That's
fun. Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah. How do you know him?
Through friends of mine in Vancouver. I've gone to Vancouver a few times with film stuff, and I met Lee, and he's such a lovely dude. And so I just saw him, and I was like, look at Lee up there with Jim Carrey. This is freaking awesome. And he's brilliant. He's a great character to balance out the hyperness of Carrey.
he's the big success story of the movie, in the sense of that character did very little in the script. That was all stuff basically encouraged by Jim that got added during production.
Yeah, just Jim and Lee coming up with stuff.
I think
he still doesn't even really do that much in the movie. It's just that everything he does is really
he's golden, you'll note he doesn't really have he he doesn't really have like a payoff that you would expect for a character that size, but that was because he wasn't originally a character that size. And I think it's also the kind of thing where, you know, when Jim Carrey
didn't really
wants
realize
to,
how much the audience was going to latch onto him either.
Well, when Jim Carrey wants to do
we're
something,
editing it, and we were like, oh wait, people are going to fucking love this guy.
That's what I was going to say. When Jim Carrey wants to do something, you let him do it on set. And I think probably the director assumed that they wouldn't use as much. Like, yeah, let's do this alt. We'll do this other version of the scene. Maybe we'll cut all this stuff out. But they ended up leaving like all of the Lee stuff in, all the Agent Stone stuff. And it became this like, and then they would test the movie and test audiences were like, we love this character. So then they couldn't cut any of it. It was fun to like witness that expand over time.
I love hearing you say that, because something I try to say to a lot of other writers as well is like writers who get so hung up on like, and I think you guys have a long experience in the industry around all this, but like a lot of writers I know get hung up on this idea of like, oh, I don't want them to change my stuff, I don't want them to blah, and like, but it's once it gets on set, and as you say, like you have someone like Jim Carrey who is like, oh, it would be great if we could try doing this, or it would be great if this character did this. Like, as you say, being a good writer is being able to step back and say, and like I know you might not, on an indie film you might have a say, but on a big film you probably don't, but it's being able to say, I am cool with this because I understand that this person is where they are for a reason, and yeah,
I mean, it's funny, like on Sonic we were on set for like some of that and got to participate a little bit, and it was great, but it's like, you know, it's like if someone else comes up with a great line, like, let's include it, because we're still gonna get credit for it. We're still credited as writers. People be like, I love that line. Be like, oh yeah, it was a really stroke of genius when I thought of that.
I love that.
But it's always going to change. I mean, when we direct ourselves, like we end up changing a lot while we're on the set. Like we would love to, like, you know, to be in that position all the time if that were possible.
Yeah, it's frustrating when you have no control over the changes. Like if we don't like a change, that sucks. But as Pat noted, sometimes the change is better. Often it's better.
Yeah, and it's like when you're working with talented guys like Jeff Fowler, it's like for the most part, he's going to make the right decision and you can trust him to do that. That's why he's directing the movie. Like we've also had experiences working with other directors that we didn't trust and made a lot of bad decisions, but we won't talk about those. But that is frustrating.
Movies,
but it's always going to change. The screenplay's always, it's just, the screenplay is the plan for the movie, but it's like when you're on the set, you make the movie, and it's not always going to be exactly what was in the script.
Oh, 100%.
And anytime we're there, really, whenever you hear the actors doing it, I'm always like, just don't say this part of the line. You don't need it.
Yeah, exactly.
And actors like will get sad too, because they're like, oh, he's cutting my lines. I'm like, no, I'm making your lines pop. You gotta understand. I'm not cutting these words because they're bad or because you're bad. I'm cutting them because I realize you don't have to say them because you're already saying them with your eyes, you know?
Yeah, and sometimes
to your acting.
And sometimes, like on The Parish, my second film, there was several times where like the actors would say like, and this is totally fine. I want this to happen. They would say like, this doesn't feel natural to me saying it this way. Could I say it this way instead? And I'm like, if something doesn't feel natural to you, then the performance isn't going to be as good as it could be, because it's going to end up sounding like it's unnatural to you. So let's go with whatever works for you. As long as it doesn't change the intent of the line, then let's go. But yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I could go down a rabbit hole here about writing, because I love chatting to other writers and getting into these discussions. But to kind of keep on with Sonic, I guess, right? Outside of Sonic himself, who from the expanded universe of Sonic, like, who are some of your favorite characters outside of, as I say, the main man in the games and stuff? Because I have some really weird ones.
I mean, yeah, and again, it's like basically, as I noted earlier, for myself at least, like I pretty much completely tapped out on video games after the Super Nintendo Genesis era. And then I never owned an N64 myself, even though I've gone back and played Ocarina of Time and Mario 64 and all the relevant ones. I've certainly played GoldenEye at people's houses back in the 90s. So like, I pretty much tapped out after Sonic 3, and then obviously, like we said, when we got the gig, I think we got whatever was the newest Sonic game at that point in time, which was like, what was it even called? I want to say it was Song of Ice and Fire, but
Sonic Boom, Fire and Ice, and then
Fire and
DS,
Ice.
we both played that one. That was good.
But it was like when Sonic Mania came out, like that was,
yes.
because I played Sonic Adventure. I as Pat said, I have a big arcade that, even though they're not arcade games, it has like a bunch of Sonic game rips on it. So I've played like Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 and stuff. But it's for me, Tails, like, because we loved Sonic 2 so much. And as you know, you're saying you had your friend who was great at it. But I feel like that was part of what was so fun, was that was an era where, like, at least at home, like if you went to the arcade, you could both play Double Dragon at the same time. But I felt like most home console games, it was like Mario games where one person would play Mario and you just sit there and watch them until they died. And then you'd do the same level as Luigi and so on and so forth. It was so fun that your friend, especially like
your little brother, that's who Tails was for. It was for your incompetent little brother.
Yeah. I was just saying, I had girlfriends at the time who like didn't play any video games, but they would still think it was fun that they could play Tails. And it was fun if you just wanted to be lazy and jump in and you could just constantly, what happens if I kill myself this way? That didn't really harm anything.
Yeah, I mean, Tails and Knuckles.
A Happy Death Day Tails movie. There we go. Tails just dying over and over again.
Totally, he was the Kenny of the video game world.
Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, Tails and Knuckles, I feel like are the most important characters, and Metal Sonic and Amy Rose, and I like.
I know
Rouge
everyone
the
else
Bat.
hates them. Yeah,
we keep suggesting Rouge the Bat to Jeff, and he's like, I don't want to do it, but we're gonna talk him into getting it.
Yeah, once we get to parts 3 and 4,
it's like this movie needs a sexy bat in it.
Maybe because the real diehard Sonic fans hate him so much. I feel like we think Big the Cat is just sort of a hilarious existence of just a giant cat who loves fishing. It feels like a Miyazaki character.
It does.
I think that's
why
he
does.
Absolutely. It's interesting because growing up, Knuckles was always my guy. Like, I loved Knuckles. I loved everything about him, the design, his music.
How do you feel about his Australian hat in the?
Yeah, in the Sonic OVA, he has like a Australian, cowboy hat with one side pinned up.
Oh, that's cute. No, I love Knuckles, but what I found was there was a character that I was obsessed with from growing up with the comics and everything, but like he was never really in the games. Like I think he was in Knuckles Chaotix, which I never had because I didn't have a 32X. Because nobody had a 32X. But it was Mighty the Armadillo. I was always like, oh, he's so cool. He looks amazing.
Mighty and Ray, they were from like the original other Sonic 2. Yeah.
I was always obsessed with him, and he never existed in the game world. And then Sonic Mania came out, and it was like, you can play as Mighty the Armadillo. I was like, all of my dreams have come true. Mighty's here.
You mentioned Chaotix. I thought you were going to bring up Vector, the crocodile.
But yeah, it is funny though, because I think I read then somewhere that Mighty was the original design for Sonic, and like as in they were going to have him be that, and somebody was like, he's not very interesting looking, so then they added the spikes and made him all this nonsense. But I do like that, as I say, after 20 years of being a fanboy for a character that didn't exist in the games, I got to play as that character. I think we touched on some stuff about video game movies, but like, what would you say is just kind of like bonus round hot buzzer moment? Like, what would you say is like your favorite video game movie? I'll start. Sonic the Hedgehog.
Yeah, Sonic the Hedgehog.
I mean, we already said the Mortal Kombat movie, but I feel that's something whenever we've talked about. I mean, I thought Detective Pikachu.
Oh, that was fun.
kind of like broke a bit of the seal too. We certainly have. I'd say it's a good movie. We have some issues with it, but
I mean, it's funny. It was pretty fun, but definitely going into it, we were like, oh, I hope this isn't like way better than Sonic. And then as we were walking out, it was like, it's not. We're good. We're good.
Well, it was just interesting because they went in a whole different approach than we did. Because the nice thing about Sonic was he was a character that most people remembered existing, but maybe remembered very little about, just like normal people. But Pokemon has stayed so, like, the games are still so popular, and the phone game, like, took the world by storm. So I'm sure that they went in with more of a pressure of, we have to have so much stuff from the games. But like, I didn't watch the show, I didn't play any of the games. So for me, watching the movie, a lot of the stuff, I'm just like, who are these characters? Like, they're barely explaining this, which I'm sure is great if you already know the mythology, but that was the 180 opposite of both what we wanted to do and what we were instructed to do with Sonic.
Was to make it extremely friendly to newcomers, whereas Detective Pikachu, it's like that one. I think maybe some people probably would have been like, started watching it and been like, this is nonsense. People who are not into alternate worlds and all the crazy stuff.
Yeah. But like the great thing,
certain members of my family.
The great thing with Sonic is that 10 minutes into, like, if even, like, that's maybe being like over calculating, but like very quickly you're brought up to speed, like almost immediately on like everything. And so to my 5-year-old, my 9-year-old, my wife who doesn't give a shit about this stuff, and me, like, we were all like, we know exactly where this is, like, when Sonic's on Earth now. Like, we know everything has kind of been put in place to everybody, and there's no confusion, there's no like, I will say that my daughter, my 5-year-old was so heartbrokenly, that's some great English, she was heartbroken with Sonic's mother figure character, the owl.
Longclaw, yeah.
Oh my god, she was just like, no, Longclaw, she freaked out. So
that was just following the Pixar model of having a huge bummer right away at the beginning of your movie.
They're also kind of like,
that's how you get them in.
Yeah.
Guardians of the Galaxy was kind of the same thing, where they were like, we're gonna have like this really devastating like first like 2 minutes that will set up the whole movie, and ours was like, I'm not sure how long our prologue is, but it's also very, very short, and we really plow through it and try and hit you right in the feels right off the bat too.
I think it works quite successfully.
I was a little nervous about it, but it seemed like it worked.
Yeah, like, and sorry, again, going back to the fact that we're horror fans and video game fans, like, pitch, what is the Sonic the Hedgehog horror movie? Like, what is, like, where would that go? Where would that end up?
Well, it's funny you say that, because it became an in-joke amongst us and Jeff, the director, and Toby Asher, our producer, was that at some point there was a phase. We used to have a very long prologue that took place on another planet, which, as Pat already noted, Neil Moritz. Because he's a super producer. He's producing like 1,000 movies at once, so he kind of pokes his head in every now and then on projects. And so
he's like, "What's going on? Tell me the story of the movie."
Yeah,
and we'd be like, "Okay, we're on another planet. There's a council of talking animals." He's like, "No."
He's like, "No." Like, the movie, like, this movie needs to begin on Earth, or they're never going to make it and no one's going to go see it. And we're like, fair enough. But during that initial prologue that never even remotely made it in the movie, we had a section that we summed up. We were writing bullet points of all the scenes up on a dry erase board, and that scene was labeled Nightmarish Carnage. And it was just sort of like, because the movie was also initially going to be PG-13, and it kind of like slowly evolved into more of a family film, and so kind of became amusing to everyone to think back that there used to be this sequence that just like was full of all these like animals getting killed.
The words Nightmarish Carnage stayed up on the board for a long time. It would get progressively more like bloodier,
we would just add
and more
blood
on
to
fire.
it. Yeah. But there did used to be a sequence where like an entire village just gets like wiped out Zack Snyder style. It's kind of hard to imagine ever being in the movie now.
There was also that sequence. There used to be a like secondary animal villain who was like locked up in like the government, secret government base. And then Robotnik, in order to basically seize control of the government stuff, like gives that creature the means to escape, and then it rampages through the base and kills everybody except for Robotnik, who's inside of like an indestructible cage. But we ended up cutting out that entire subplot and that particular bloody horror movie sequence, even though it would have been great. That was going to be our, Dr. Octopus waking up in the emergency room.
But I think the horror movie version is, where Sonic is more like Selma Blair's character from the Hellboy movies, where he has no control over his powers and will like phase out and wake up to discover he'd turned in a ball and like punched holes through everyone's chest and killed a whole mall full of people.
So yeah, I mean, it does. That makes a lot
Dr.
of sense.
Robotnik is the hero who has to take Sonic down. That's the horror movie version.
Yeah.
We've now hit that's the Brightburn of Sonic movies.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, this has been a blast. But Josh, I want to quickly say as well, like you have a podcast that was on my rotation when I was driving a lot. I found that in lockdown,
Back when we were all listening to podcasts.
I know,
so we could
right?
Use our cars.
Lockdown's been killing me, man, for podcasts. I used to listen to so many. It was like, as I said to you, Movie Crypt, Best Movies Never Made, which is Josh's podcast, Movie Crypt, Shockwaves at the time, so many that Screen Drafts, one of my favorites, and Strong Language Violent Scenes on rotation every day. I would just be listening to one episode, as regularly as possible. But Josh's podcast is about these movies that you hear about that almost got made, or in some cases like got partially made, and they just never ended up actually being released. And there's been some amazing episodes. Did you do, was it a 3-parter or a 4-parter on the Super Mario Bros. Unmade movie?
That was Pat was the guest on that episode. We did a 4-parter. I think we intended it to only be like 2 or 3, and it ballooned into 4 of the versions of Super Mario Brothers leading up to the infamous Bob Hoskins, John Leguizamo film.
I also really love the Spider-Man, like the James Cameron Spider-Man. Like there's so many good episodes, and it's co-hosted by.
I listen to the show all the time. Even
so
when
you'll
I'm
like
not at it.
We're doing a 4-part Wonder Woman currently.
Oh, fantastic! Like, yeah, it's co-hosted by Steven Scarlatta, he was a producer on Jodorowsky's Dune, which is another great movie about an unmade movie.
Fantastic movie, yeah, great doc.
A fantastic documentary. But the question I have is, like, I mean, obviously we talked there briefly about the Super Mario one, but like, do you have any kind of like quick examples of any other video game movies that were like set up to be made and then didn't get made?
Well, I will say, we've had numerous guests turn us down to be on the podcast for a variety of reasons. But my favorite one that I gotta respect is that I wrote to Paul W.S. Anderson, because he was trying to make a Castlevania movie, because he did Mortal Kombat and Resident Evil, which regardless of whether or not you think they're good, they're very successsul. They both films, especially Resident Evil.
Resident Evil had 93 sequels, I believe. Is an accurate number.
But he was trying to do Castlevania around that same time, possibly even before Resident Evil. Yeah. Like maybe he moved on to Resident Evil because he couldn't kick Castlevania. And I invited him on the podcast, and he's like, "Oh, I'd love to come on, but it still might get made."
Oh wow! 20 plus
I
years.
Appreciate that. Yeah, exactly. He's still plugging away on it. But like that, I would love a Castlevania movie, a good or a bad one. I just feel like it'd be fun.
I totally.
Granted, there's been we're now in a post like underworld world, but I feel like a Castlevania movie in the 90s would have been real fun when we hadn't really yet done it's about super powered vampires fighting. It's pretty much just been played. And I don't know if this would have predated Blade. I'm not sure what year he was trying to do it.
And I mean, Castlevania has had a little bit of a resurgence because of the Netflix show. But when I kind of heard there was going to be this anime style Castlevania show on Netflix, and it was a Netflix show, I was like, I don't think this is going to work. And then it did, and season 2 got announced, and they had these phenomenal voice actors and everything, and I was like, oh wow, like I need to shut up in future.
I also would have loved, especially because this was like kind of him during his prime, where I feel like his movies were all really great. If Gore Verbinski had done his BioShock movie, I feel like that would have been really awesome.
I have multiple.
Oh, you got one?
I have multiple
tattoo?
BioShock tattoos. I have a Big Daddy. Oh, I can't even get the angle, but I have a Big Daddy. It's a Banksy style Big Daddy. BioShock is one of my all-time favorite, and yeah, Gore Verbinski or no, Del Toro wasn't lined up to do that at any point, was he? No, because he was doing it, The Mountains of Madness, or trying to.
I don't remember he's been attached to so
everything.
Many things. I would not be surprised if he had been loosely attached, but I know Gore was the one who had gotten the closest to making it, and I've heard so many different reasons why, up to including that he doesn't like flying, and they were going to have to shoot it in Australia to get it on the budget he wanted, and he just didn't want to go.
No, they should just I
hope that's not
pump
true.
Him full of sedatives and like on the A-Team.
Yeah, exactly. That's like just right there, right, guys. You've gotten a sample of Josh's knowledge about this stuff, and as I say,
well, Steve's the one who really knows. I'm just kind of the color guy.
He's the good talking guy.
Yeah, the good
cop,
bad
cop.
Yeah. I also would have loved. It was funny because it died like the same week we had a general meeting at Netflix. So the executive there was pretty open about it. Was when Netflix was going to do their Legend of Zelda TV show. That one did seriously die because it leaked to the press, and Nintendo's such a specific company that they were just like, well, now we don't want to do it.
It was like a columnist for the Wall Street Journal or something broke it and ruined the deal. It was gonna happen if not for that.
That makes me physically ill to know that, actually. I remember years back I saw somebody just did a fan poster of a Miyazaki style Zelda movie, and I was like, I just want that, hook it to my veins. A Hayao Miyazaki Zelda is everything I could ever ask for. Zelda is another one of those ones that it's will we ever see an adaptation of it? And if so,
or Metroid. It's like Nintendo plays it all so close to the vest that we might never. I mean, they're supposed to be making this Mario movie at Illumination, but there hasn't been really any word on progress on it, and I have a feeling that Nintendo is probably pretty controlling, so it might be difficult.
Yeah,
it'll be interesting if they ever manage to get it all the way there. Yeah, I hope they do.
Because we talked a little bit about that on an episode where we had screenwriter Josh Olson on, and he had briefly worked on a Halo movie, but that one very much straight up died because Microsoft had never worked in movies before, so they were assuming they were going to have the same level of control that they had over the video games.
Yeah.
And it was just, I think they were it was just sort of too expensive and impossible to deal with. And that was one where it was so faithful to the game that it didn't really work at a movie and would have cost $400 million.
I mean, we were fortunate in our case that Sega kind of allowed us the space to do what we felt needed to be done to be a movie. I mean, not just us, but the whole movie team, the studio, and Neil.
Yeah,
and
they're very
Sega was always kind of
care about.
We were updating them and telling them what was going on, and sometimes they'd be like, you can't be this, but it could be this. Yeah. But they were cooperative and open to things, and we managed to get it there, which was great. So Sega was terrific.
I can imagine, as you say, that Nintendo, as much as we all adore Nintendo, I can imagine they are so controlling of their IP, they're so controlling of everything that I imagine it would be so Mario drinks a latte. No, Mario cannot drink a latte. That is completely forbidden. Mario cannot have caffeine. That's not allowed. And
it's also even though it was a long time ago, those guys are all still alive at Nintendo who were there back for the Bob Hoskins movie. And I think that still stings. Because I think that was an instance where
if that movie hadn't happened, things might be way different over at Nintendo.
But that was an instance where someone at the company was let's just license this out to a studio. And then that's what happened. And they're we can never allow we can never not have control over what we're doing.
I'm just grateful that that movie exists, because whether you like that movie or not, you think it's good or bad, there are so few universes in the multiverse where that movie can exist and be something that actually got made. Like, on your show, you talk about films that don't get made. And when you look at that movie, you're like, there is no way that this should have gotten all the way through.
Well, I think we even say on those episodes that it's like, if that hadn't been a Super Mario Brothers movie, if that exact movie had come out and had been an original concept, it probably still wouldn't have done well, but we all would have been like, this movie's insane. Like, this is amazing.
It's like Strange Days for kids.
Demolition Man, but only like 70% as good.
Yeah.
But it's like, but we all love Demolition Man because Demolition Man's great, you know?
It was just, if you loved the Mario games or the Saturday morning cartoon, and then you watch that movie, you were kind of like, this doesn't really seem like it's the same thing.
As I say though, it's just, this is one of the reasons that I suggest you checking out Josh's podcast, Josh and Steve's podcast, Best Movies Never Made, is like, if you're a deep diver, you love these stories, you love learning about stuff, like, there's no better show to just get you excited about the things that never were.
But maybe someday could be. Eventually, they're going to make one of these movies you've already talked about.
Yeah, that's my dream.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and it'll be because of the podcast. There'll be this big resurgence of interest around it.
We get 5%.
Josh, Patrick, I want to say a massive thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me today. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've loved nerding out with you about everything from games to writing and everything in between. And I was wondering, I will put links in the description to where people can follow you on the socials, but I know, Josh, like, you're both active on Twitter, and then I can link people off to like Instagram or whatever if you want. Or I know that some people have moved away from social media at this time, understandably. But
my Twitter is at Pat_Casey, but the letters Casey, not like my name Casey, for maximum confusion. Pat_Casey.
Okay, like Kansas City. Cool. Gotcha.
Yeah, like Kansas City. And then my Instagram is Pat Casey Superstar. But there I spell my whole name out, all one word.
Nice. That is glorious.
I'm on Instagram as Josh_S_Miller. I don't have a personal Twitter account, but we're there for Best Movies Never Made is at Never Made Film, and we're pretty active there.
And I think I constantly tagged you and stuff, possibly as Friday Night Frights.
Friday Night Frights, yeah, so we will do that as well.
Yeah. But we will make sure that people, and especially Best Movies Never Made, make sure people check that out. I'll put links again to that podcast below.
Awesome.
But guys, obviously, right, the one thing that we didn't get to in this, but I'm just going to wish you well on it here at the end of it, is obviously, we can't talk about the Sonic the Hedgehog sequel.
Yeah, we can't really say anything about it, so.
But everybody knows it's happening, which is the great thing. I mean, I am so... Yeah. All I'll say, because again, there might be people that didn't see the movie, so just in case, I'm going to say, like, I'm not going to give this away, but, like, the moment at the end of the movie, my daughters thought I was having some kind of a seizure in the cinema because I lost my shit. It was as big as any Marvel reveal, as big as any, like, I was like, oh my God, they're doing it. So when I heard that the sequel had been announced, I was like, yes. Yeah.
We wanted everyone to go home excited for the sequel after the first one because we were hoping to get a sequel. And now, like, the one spoiler I'll tell you about Sonic 2, it's going to be awesome.
Awesome. I was like, don't say it. But what it was, I'm just going to wish you well on that. And I'm going to say, like, I cannot wait to see. Because look, guys, Sonic the Hedgehog, the game was really good. But Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was iconic. So,
yeah, that's what we're hoping to have the same proportion of quality, I guess.
Awesome.
I'm trying to think of how else to put that.
Awesome. Guys, thank you so much. I'm going to ask people watching here at this point to please, if you've enjoyed the chat as well, there's a like and a subscribe button down below. Please hit them. It really helps me out with kind of keeping the channel going, getting more guests on and all of that good stuff. So please do so. And I'm going to close it out by saying what I always say at the end of every episode, which is, let's survive together and peace out. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gotta go fast.